King Ronan Blackthorn ruled the largest werewolf kingdom in the northern lands. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and known for a voice that could silence a room without him even raising it. Packs from every corner of the territory feared him. Council members obeyed him without question. Soldiers spoke his name with a mix of respect and dread. To everyone who looked at him, Ronan seemed like a man who could never be broken. But no one knew the truth. No one knew that every night, behind the locked doors of his private chambers, the king fought a war that had nothing to do with enemies or politics. He fought his own body. 10 years earlier, during a coup attempt led by a rival pack, Ronan had been bitten by an assassin, using a rare poison meant to kill slowly and silently. The assassin died before revealing the antidote, and the healers of that time could never fully remove the poison from his blood. It settled deep inside him, dormant most days, but flaring into unbearable pain during moments of stress or exertion. Over the years, Ronan learned to hide it. He learned to smile through pain, to stand tall when his knees wanted to buckle, and to dismiss his guards the moment he felt an episode coming. If anyone discovered his weakness, he knew what would happen. Packs did not follow broken kings. Rivals would see it as an invitation. War would follow. So he carried the secret alone, year after year, telling himself that a king's first duty was to appear unshaken, even if it cost him everything on the inside. That was the world Alira Voss stepped into, on a quiet autumn morning. She arrived at the palace gates with a small bag of herbs, bandages, and old healing texts passed down through generations of her family. She had been chosen as the new Omega healer after the previous physician, an elderly man who had served the royal family for decades, retired to the countryside. Most Omegas in Blackthorn society were expected to stay quiet, decorative, and obedient. Alira was different. She had trained since childhood in a rare form of healing that ran through her bloodline, a gift that let her sense the bond between a werewolf and their wolf simply by standing near them. She could feel when something was wrong, even if the person in front of her showed no outward sign of it. When she was introduced to the king for the first time, she felt it immediately. A strange, hollow ache beneath his composed expression. Something was wrong with him, deeply wrong, though he stood before the court looking as powerful as ever. She said nothing, not yet. Ronan, for his part, barely looked at her. He had grown used to keeping healers at a distance, giving them only enough access to treat soldiers and servants, never himself. He assigned Alira to the infirmary wing, far from his private chambers, and told his guards to keep her occupied with minor duties. He told himself this was simply caution. He told himself it had nothing to do with the uneasy feeling he got whenever her eyes lingered on him a moment too long. Weeks passed. Alira settled into palace life, healing soldiers with wounds from training, easing the aches of elderly servants, and gaining quiet respect from the staff for her skill and her calm nature. She rarely saw the king, and when she did, it was only from a distance during court gatherings. But every time she was near him, that same hollow ache returned, stronger now, as if his condition were worsening. She began to watch him more closely, not out of curiosity, but out of concern that felt strangely personal, though she could not explain why. Then, during a public council meeting, it happened. Ronan stood at the head of the long stone table, discussing trade agreements with representatives from neighboring packs. Midway through his sentence, his voice faltered. His hand gripped the edge of the table. For a brief moment, his face lost all color, and his knees seemed to weaken beneath him. He recovered quickly, blinking hard and clearing his throat, blaming it on a long night and too little sleep. The council members nodded, satisfied with the explanation, and the meeting continued as if nothing had happened. But Alira, standing near the back of the hall, felt it like a wave crashing into her chest. The wrongness inside him surged violently for those few seconds, then settled again, hidden beneath his forced composure. No one else noticed. No one else could have. That night, she could not sleep. Something told her she needed to check on him, no matter the risk of overstepping her place. She made her way through the quiet corridors of the palace, past sleepy guards who barely glanced at the Omega healer walking with quiet purpose. She knocked once, no answer. She knocked again, then pushed the door open despite every rule telling her not to. Inside, she found Ronan on the floor near his bed, one hand pressed against his chest, his breathing shallow and uneven. Sweat covered his forehead. His eyes, when they met hers, held a rare flash of fear before hardening into anger. "Get out," he said, his voice rough. "This does not concern you." "It concerns me now," Illyra said, kneeling beside him without hesitation. "You're in pain. Let me help." "I said get out." He tried to push himself up, but his arm shook, and he collapsed back down with a pained breath. Illyra ignored his protests. She placed her hands gently near his chest, closing her eyes, feeling for the source of the wrongness inside him. She recognized it almost immediately, a technique her grandmother had once described in old healing texts, a method for drawing out lingering poison that had settled too deep for ordinary remedies to reach. She worked quickly, murmuring soft words, guiding warmth through her palms into his body, easing the poison's grip, just enough for him to breathe steadily again. Slowly, the tension in his body faded, his breathing calmed, color returned to his face. He stared at her, stunned, as the pain that had haunted him for a decade eased for the first time in longer than he could remember. "How," he whispered, "did you do that?" "My family has healed for generations," she said quietly. "But this isn't something ordinary herbs can fix. Whatever is inside you, it's been there a long time." Ronan said nothing at first. He simply looked at her, the weight of 10 years of hiding pressing down on him harder than the poison ever had. Finally, in a low voice, he admitted the truth. He told her about the coup, the bite, the poison that never fully left, and the years spent pretending to be untouchable while quietly falling apart behind closed doors. Illyra listened without judgment. When he finished, she did not pity him, and she did not see him as weak. She saw a man who had carried an impossible burden completely alone, refusing to let anyone share the weight. "You don't have to hide this from me," she said. "Let me help you fight it properly, not just manage it in secret." For the first time in years, Ronan allowed himself to trust someone with the truth. Over the following weeks, Illyra worked with him in secret, meeting in his private chambers late at night when the palace was quiet. She used rare herbs gathered from the northern forests, ancient techniques passed down through her family, and a binding ritual meant to slowly draw the poison from his blood and strengthen the weakened bond between him and his wolf. The process was slow and difficult, but for the first time since the coup, Ronan felt something close to hope. He also began to see Illyra differently, not as a healer assigned to the palace, but as someone whose quiet strength matched his own. She never flinched at his weakest moments. She never treated him like a fragile thing to be pitied. She simply stayed, steady and patient, helping him fight a battle he had convinced himself he had to face alone. But secrets in a palace rarely stay hidden forever. Lord Draven, an ambitious council member who had long resented Ronan's hold on the throne, began to notice the king's frequent private meetings with the new Omega healer. He grew suspicious, watching from the shadows, questioning servants, and piecing together fragments of information. He did not yet know the full truth, but he sensed weakness, and weakness was exactly what he had been waiting for. Draven had wanted the throne for years, believing himself far more capable of leading the kingdom than Ronan. He began quietly gathering support among council members who shared his ambitions, hinting that the king was hiding something significant, something that could threaten the stability of the kingdom if left unchecked. He needed proof, and he intended to find it before the kingdom's most important event of the year, the founding ceremony, a ritual celebration requiring the king to publicly demonstrate his strength before all the packs. As the ceremony approached, Illyra noticed Ronan's condition beginning to worsen again, despite their progress. The final stage of the healing ritual required a difficult trial that tested the body's endurance, and the demands of the upcoming ceremony were pushing him past his limits before he had fully recovered. "You shouldn't push yourself so hard right now," Illyra warned him the night before the ceremony. "Your body isn't ready." "I have no choice," Ronan said. "If I fail to appear strong before the packs, everything falls apart. Draven is already looking for reasons to challenge me." "Then let me be there," Illyra said firmly. "If something happens, I won't let you face it alone." He hesitated, torn between his instinct to protect his secret and his growing trust in her. Finally, he nodded. The day of the founding ceremony arrived. The courtyard overflowed with representatives from every pack in the kingdom, all gathered to witness the traditional strength trial that marked the king's continued right to rule. Ronan stood at the center, dressed in ceremonial armor, his expression calm despite the storm building beneath his composed exterior. Partway through the ritual, as he lifted the ceremonial blade required for the final display of strength, the poison surged violently through his system. His arm trembled, his vision blurred. Pain shot through his chest, with an intensity he had never experienced, even during his worst nights alone. He staggered, and for the first time in 10 years, the mask he had worn so carefully began to crack in front of the entire kingdom. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Council members exchanged alarmed glances. Draven, standing near the front, watched with a satisfied gleam in his eyes, ready to seize the moment. Before Ronan could collapse completely, Alira stepped forward from the edge of the courtyard, pushing past guards who tried to stop her. She reached him just as his knees buckled, catching him before he fell, and without hesitation, she began the emergency healing rite in full view of everyone present. Warm light glowed from her palms as she worked quickly, drawing the surging poison away from his heart, stabilizing his breathing, and easing the visible tremors in his body. The crowd fell silent, watching in stunned disbelief as the powerful king, who had never shown a single crack in his armor, was openly, undeniably vulnerable in front of them all. When the light faded and Ronan's breathing steadied, he slowly rose to his feet, standing taller despite what had just happened. He turned to face the crowd, his voice steady even though his body still trembled slightly from the ordeal. 10 years ago, he said, his voice carrying across the silent courtyard, I was poisoned during an attempt on my life. I have carried that poison every day since, hiding it, because I feared what you would think of a king who was not invincible. The crowd remained silent, absorbing his words. I was wrong to hide it, Ronan continued. Not because weakness is something to be ashamed of, but because carrying it alone nearly destroyed me. It was not my strength that protected this kingdom all these years. It was my refusal to fall, even when falling would have been easier. Draven stepped forward, attempting to seize the moment. A king who hides such weakness cannot be trusted to lead, he declared loudly, hoping to rally support. But the crowd's reaction was not what Draven expected. Murmurs of respect spread through the packs instead of doubt. Many had endured their own hardships in silence, and Ronan's honesty, rather than making him seem weak, made him seem more human, more relatable, more worthy of loyalty than a king who had never struggled at all. An elder from one of the northern packs stepped forward. A king who hides pain to protect his people is not weak, he said. He is exactly the kind of leader worth following. But a council member who tries to exploit that pain for his own gain, he turned toward Draven, shows exactly the kind of leader he would be. Draven's attempt to use the revelation against Ronan collapsed under the weight of the crowd's disapproval. Whispers turned against him instead, and within days, his influence on the council quietly crumbled as more members withdrew their support, unwilling to align themselves with someone who had tried to profit from the king's suffering. In the weeks that followed, Alira continued treating Ronan, and with his secret finally out in the open, the healing process became far easier. Without the constant pressure of hiding his condition, his body responded better to the remaining stages of the ritual, and slowly, the poison that had haunted him for a decade began to fade completely from his system. Ronan changed after that day, not into a different person, but into a more honest version of himself. He no longer felt the need to appear untouchable before his people. He led with the same strength as before, but now it came from a place of earned trust rather than hidden fear. The kingdom, rather than weakening under the revelation of his vulnerability, grew stronger, united by a king who had proven that true strength was not about hiding pain, but about facing it honestly. Alira remained by his side, no longer just as his healer, but as someone he trusted completely, someone who had seen him at his weakest and chosen to stay anyway. Their bond deepened naturally over time, built on quiet nights of healing, honest conversations, and a mutual respect neither of them had expected to find in the palace's guarded halls. Months later, as the last traces of the poison finally disappeared from his blood, Ronan stood on the palace balcony, overlooking the kingdom he had protected for so long, Illyra beside him. For the first time in 10 years, his body felt truly his own, free of pain, free of fear, free of secrets. For the first time in years, the king slept without pain and without secrets.